States. He says that California is very different than the rest of the country in a lot of ways. California's economy, for example, is the largest economy of all the states. In fact, it's something like fourth or fifth largest economy in the world if you compare it with other countries. California is as big as a country like Germany or Russia. And speaking of Russia, Russia gets mentioned quite a bit in this interview for different reasons, and I'll get to that in a moment. But California not only is different culturally, according to Marcus, but also politically. He thinks that America is falling apart, and I can't really blame him for thinking that given the state of the country right now and the rhetoric that you hear online and on Twitter. This idea of America falling apart is popular right now, unfortunately. But he says that the reason America is falling apart is because of this divide between cultures. He even believes that this Calexit, this California secession idea, could be the answer, the antidote, so to speak. He believes that this is the way the world is headed anyway, that America is already going to be falling apart, so why not do it peacefully and legally through secession rather than through violence or civil war? It's interesting stuff. We talk about that and some other things. We talk about how he got started with this idea. We talk about the book that he wrote back in 2012 called California's Next Century. But we also talk about some news that recently came out that suggested that a Russian spy was working with Marcus and his organization in order to help the cause of California secession with the explicit goal of breaking America apart, undermining democracy, things like that. Anyway, I'll let you listen and decide on your own. I didn't get a chance to ask all of the questions that I wanted to, so we will be having him back in the future to give us an update. Okay, again, this is just the first episode. I'm still learning everything, so please bear with me. We're just getting started. This is the Different Things podcast, and here is my conversation with Marcus Ruiz Evans. You are the founder of the Calexit movement.
Yes. My name is Marcus Ruiz Evans, and I wrote the book California's Next Century in 2012. And that was the first time anybody looked seriously, not a joke, not a daydream, but seriously at the idea of California could survive on its own. Some form independent from America. 2013, the very next year, Tom Elias, who's a well-known columnist and has covered California government for decades. He was the guy who got the first recall election going that unseated Governor Gray Davis. Tom Elias wrote about my book, and he read the book and provided the first review, and it said, I think the title was, So How Would California Do on its own? And that's still available if you type in Tom Elias or Marcus Ruiz Evans. That book, that article, 2012, 2013, first time anybody had ever seriously talked about the idea of being a California nation. And that's documented. There's no one before me, and there's no one before that article. Pat Morrison was an LA Times reporter who wrote a paragraph saying, wouldn't it be cool? Paul Starobin was an international reporter who talked about the idea of California could survive independently from America, but nobody had ever looked at the idea of how do you do this, how would it work, all the intricate details, and came from a position of we can actually do this and I'm going to lay out the steps. And then the article by Tom Elias was the first time anybody had ever put that idea into popular press. And those are the earliest dated anything related to Calexit.
So this is not something that the Russians started?
Not unless Tom Elias works for the Russian government and is a sleeper cell, and not unless, as I've always said and jokingly, Vladimir Putin wrote my book for me. I started writing the book in 2006. I didn't have the notes done until 2011. I filed 2 to 3 federal copyrights of the material in 2006, 2009. I think a final one in 2011. So,
and all of that came from your own research. Nobody slipped you some faxes or
that's what I say.
And emails.
No, that's what I say. It's all my own research. I came to it on my own. I was primarily inspired by Pat Weston, Paul Starobin, and Professor Abraham Lowenthal.
Okay. Look those people up because I have no idea.
Yeah, so Pat Morrison is an LA Times Pulitzer Prize-winning writer.
Right.
She also suggested California should secede somewhere around 2002 in a paragraph kind of jokingly. Paul Starobin is an international reporter who's worked on every continent on Earth. And he worked in Russia, and he wrote a book where he said America's falling apart. And then in that book, he had a chapter on California could survive on its own, even though America's falling apart. Abraham Lowenthal is a professor at Long Beach State University. He was the top professor for international freight movement in America anywhere, period. And then he moved to USC in the, it's some sort of program started previously by Governor Schwarzenegger on international trade. And Professor Abraham Lowenthal wrote a book called Global California, where he basically said California loses being part of America, international trade-wise. We can't get our deals approved. We can't get the money that we need. We are stalled by them, etc. And he was accused of promoting secession, and he even had to write an article backing it up, going, I'm not saying secession. So when I saw that a professor was basically saying we lose being part of America, and I saw a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer in the LA Times saying this is an interesting idea, and then I saw another reporter who had traveled to multiple continents, studied international policy, and also brought this up, that is what inspired me to push the book in a direction of saying California should be independent. Originally, the book was only going to talk about one thing, how California culture was different from American culture and how that was on public display with the Iraq War. As I've said many times, the idea for Calexit came from one day when I was in my tia's house in Marin County. On the TV, it said, America's going to invade Iraq because 70% of the American people in a poll said they wanted to. Not 5 minutes later, on that same channel or another major network channel. Same day, 5 minutes later on TV, new poll. 70% of Californians are against the Iraq War. And I said, isn't that interesting that we have Californians are as opposite from Americans as you could possibly be on the idea of invading Iraq? And I'd always heard that we were different people and weirdos and, et cetera, because my mom had traveled around America and she told me stories.
No other states had a similar percentage like that?
No, I think maybe New York. Maybe New York. But I will say that the
state here and there.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, if you look at the number of protests against the Iraq War, there were 3 million person protests against the Iraq War, and 2 of them were in California alone.
Oh, wow.
So if we're talking about who really felt that way, I'm like, nobody. We did 2/3 of all the million people protests against the Iraq War in America by ourselves.
So you were able to, you noticed that California is pretty much different than the most of the country in some of its politics. I mean, obviously it's a blue state, but you saw that there was differences in our opinions on things, and you felt that, Calexit is a good idea.
Well, I grew up in California. I was born here, raised here, went to California schools, went to California public schools, went to California universities, and then I worked for the California state government, and I've also worked in the San Diego, Los Angeles, Sacramento Bay Area, and Central Valley offices. So I've lived all around California, born, raised here, went to schools, went to universities, went to work here. And I had always known that California culture was different from American culture. And everybody that I met in California knew that too. I haven't met one person in my entire time in California who said, California culture, it's just like Nebraska or Arizona or Texas or New Hampshire. It's a little bit inappropriate, but there used to be a phrase called, we're not supposed to say this anymore. I'm only going to say it just to get the thing. I'm not endorsing this phrase, but there was a phrase called the land of fruits and nuts. And given that we lived in the Central Valley, we heard that all the time. So we grew up knowing that America viewed us as weird and bizarre and full of weirdos. And I'd always known that. That was never a question. The question was, could California be independent at some sort of level from America, not if it's culturally different? I felt the book wasn't going to be controversial if I explained the cultural differences. And it was because while trying to write a book on how California culture is different than American culture, inspired by the vote of Iraq, I kept running into other authors who were saying California should be a nation. And it was because of them I followed. So basically they say follow the storyline or follow the data, don't follow your heart when you write a book. So you may have an idea of what you want to write in a book, but every good author knows you follow the data. Meaning if you wanted to write a book about cats and dogs,
stick to the data.
Yeah, and if the data shows you, well, really the most interesting subject on cats and dogs is cats' relationships with squirrels, you're not supposed to go, damn it, the book's about cats and dogs. You're supposed to follow where the data is because that's seen as more honest to the material. And so
sense.
I was just going to write a book on how California is culturally different from America that turned into California should be separate from America and could pull it off because of people like Paul Starobin and Pat Morrison and Professor Abraham Lowenthal and other scholars. So I initially started with the decision by America to invade Iraq, and I saw that the percentage differences of support for California and America were very different, and that made me want to write a sociology text, a book, just explaining how they were culturally different. It was because I ran into so many other reporters, international reporters, scholars, Pulitzer Prize winners, experts in their field who were saying California, A, loses being part of America, and B, California could, in fact, succeed spectacularly independent from America, that I was pushed by those people to move the book from a direction of a simple sociology study into a text about taking on an action of becoming independent. And it was because of them. I didn't join the idea and say, oh, California should be a nation. I can see that so clearly now. It was just a simple, why are we so culturally different? And then sometime between 2006 and 2011 in the research and just coming up to these people, I came to the conclusion that this was the direction that the data should go. And then I pushed the book in that direction because so many other people who had already spoken inspired me to go that way.
Got it. Okay, so the book comes out in 2012. Fast forward to 2016, we have Donald Trump wins the election. I heard you talk about this before. Once that election happened, you got a lot more support.
We had a lot of support. So we had started off, the article by Tom Elias came out in 2013, How Would California Do on Its Own, covering my book, California's Next Century. People found me within 6 to 8 months of that article, and we started to build a small team. That small team turned into what was called Sovereign California. And later on, we changed the name from Sovereign California to Yes California. We were able to get somebody to run for assembly. And when that person ran for assembly, they were running as a secessionist. And that got us a lot of attention because nobody had ever run in California as a secessionist, ever in California history, ever. So we were able to actually get the government of California to print ballots and brochures because they have to list all the people running and have to list their major occupation like teacher, school driver, school bus driver, et cetera. So this was the first time in any California election where it said, it listed an assembly candidate and go, oh, what's your major occupation? Secessionist. Like that had never been printed in any government document. No one had ever run for office on that platform before. We had a member who did that. That got us in the LA Times twice with, I think, a half-page article and then almost a full-page article. Pat Morrison was the first person to interview us with the first article. And then she recommended to Robin Abakazarian, her colleague, to do the second interview. And Pat Morrison is the person who had wrote about California seceding in around 2002. So she saw a secessionist running for assembly and said, oh, we got to do an interview over that, and directed other LA Times reporters to also interview us about that. Those two articles about somebody running for assembly on the concept of secession exploded us into basically California mainstream news. After that point, with the two LA Times articles, we were in San Francisco Chronicle, Sacramento Bee. I remember one time we were doing a protest somewhere. And on that day, there was a TV ad about us in San Diego and another one in San Francisco. And we didn't visit either of those two cities that day. And so we go, wow, we're getting saturated where two different major metro areas are covering us on television on the same day when we're in a third metro area. And we grew to about 10,000 members, Facebook, Twitter, etc. But we also noticed that we plateaued. So once we hit about 10,000 members, once we had gotten to every major newspaper and television news station, that was it. We stopped. We couldn't get any more news attention. We couldn't get any news attention outside of California. And so we went to an international conference because the Texas nationalist movement had told us, well, we too had trouble getting our cause in the media. And what we did at Texas was we went to this international conference. And what happened there was European reporters started writing about us. Okay. And once European writers started writing about us and European newspapers started covering us, guess who immediately jumped into the foray? American newspapers. Why? Because they were being what's called scooped. Somebody was writing a story in their backyard without them being involved. That makes you look stupid as a newspaper and like you don't know how to do your job.
You missed something important.
And so they got embarrassed and they immediately jumped to it. So we said, we can't get the New York Times, ABC TV, NBC, CBS, anyone outside of California. TV, print, nothing. Blog posts were very popular at that time. Nobody would cover us outside of California, period. And we go, well, that's weird. This is the world's 5th largest economy. We have an interesting concept here. We know that it's historical, and you guys can't mention it at all. So we felt that that was a biased news cycle because we go, well, this is just an interesting story, even if you think this idea is silly, and you guys won't cover it at all. So we went to the international conference, and in 24 hours, guess what happened? We were on French, English, German, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, Filipino, Hungarian, Costa Rican, Mexican, Argentinian, Brazilian news. And guess what happened within 12 hours of that? The New York Times and ABC television decided for the first time ever to cover us. Wow. Now, we had emailed them before, couldn't spend a second to respond to us. But within 12 hours of everyone on Europe talking about us, they too decided to cover us for the first time ever. What an incredible chance coincidence, right?
So, wow, that's pretty interesting.
That's how all that controversy happened. A lot of people go, how did you go to another country? Why did you even bother to do that? And when I explained we weren't getting fair attention by the media, and the moment that we did this, suddenly everybody snapped into place. You know, everybody gets it.
Okay, so a little bit after that, we started hearing negative articles. So you said the New York Times and LA Times and all these are starting to cover you in America now. But a lot of them were negative towards Yes California and what you guys are trying to do. Why is that?
Well, I want to point out that I encourage everybody to go back in time and look at the newspaper coverage because this is easy for anybody to do. So if you go back to when we went to the international conference around October, September 2016, New York Times, and I think it was CBS or ABC television covered us. They said nothing negative about us at all. They didn't say anything negative about any of the other American states who also went to this conference. Now, they pointed out that Russia was probably holding the conference for self-serving means, meaning that no separatist movements in Russia were also included in the conference. And that was kind of obvious that they were doing it for self-serving means. But that was it. That New York Times article, ABC, that's it. There was no, you're spies, you're bad people, this is a plot to destroy America. Nothing. Now, fast forward to October 2016 to after November 2016. And then let's take it up to January, February 2017. And what I would tell everybody is November 2016, Trump gets elected. December 2016, Calexit is doing wonderfully. Everybody, we grew 40,000 members, I think, in a week. Rachel Maddow even talked positively about us. Yes, Rachel Maddow. Nobody remembers this, but Rachel Maddow did a show where she encouraged people to join Yes California specifically by name.
Really?
Yeah, she said that, and she had it on her thing. And she was literally had her website up in her blue book and was showing everybody and smiling and pointing this out. It was the episode with Javier Becerra. So she had Javier Becerra on her show, and she was talking to him about the resist movement, and she was talking about Yes California specifically by name for the Calexit movement. So we were getting a lot of good press. If you look at the press, November...
And you said she was talking to who?
Javier Becerra, who was the Attorney General at the time of California.
Okay.
So if you want to find the episode, you find it. Rachel Maddow interviews Javier Becerra somewhere around 2016, 2017 early. Now, if you look at the news coverage, if Rachel Maddow is covering us well, and you look at the news coverage, November 2016, December 2016, and January 2017, it's all positive. That's what I want to point out to everybody. By the way, I've said this to 35 reporters. Not one has challenged me or questioned me or ever printed the story. as a way of embarrassing me. It's almost like they know it's true and they don't want to challenge it. I see their faces when I bring this up, and they all just kind of like look down, like they know what's up. So,
because you've been having to undo a lot of this misinformation. You've been contacting every time you see an article that's written wrong, you'll say something. Yeah, we just emailed the Council of Foreign Relations yesterday, and I got an email back from them saying, "Whoops." Aren't they isn't CFR like the Illuminati? I don't want to get into it. They are accused of being that. They are the top foreign policy think tank in America and have been since the 1930s. I'll leave it there. They say some crazy stuff in there. If we go down that thing, then this show's about that. Right. So I'm going to steer clear of that. I'm just going to say officially, top foreign policy think tank for about the last century in America. They wrote about us. They provided misinformation. I directly emailed them, emailed everyone on their staff, and pointed out. Have they changed that yet? I haven't reviewed the email yet. I just got into that battle yesterday. Okay. Oh, that's brand new. And I got an email from them that I have yet to read. Okay, so even back then in 2017 maybe, when they started to claim March 2017. March 2017. If you go back to end of February, March 2017 is when the narrative changed. So if you look at November, December 2016, January 2017, the narrative is one way. You look at February, March 2017, the narrative dramatically shifts. And I encourage anybody to look at the newspaper articles about how we were covered in that 5 month period, and you'll see a wild shift in how we were covered. Wow. And it was... And these guys are cool because Trump sucks. And then it turned into, oh, these guys must all be Russian spies. We don't have evidence of that, but it's got to be true. Right. So, they started saying that Russia was involved. Putin himself was involved somehow. Yeah. To try to... So that was even back then they were talking about that. And it didn't help that one of the founding members was actually living in Russia. Yeah, well, I appreciate the fact you said it correctly. Right. You said one of the founding members. Right. That is not what the media said. The media said the founder. See how the phrase that you used and the phrase the founder are very different? Yeah. So they said the guy who invented the whole thing, didn't mention my name at all, didn't recognize that I existed at all, was in Russia, and he invented the whole thing in Russia. That was a total lie. And this is Louis Marinelli. If you don't know this guy, he's an English-speaking person, but he also speaks fluent Russian, and I believe he teaches classes in Russia and stuff like that. He does teach English classes in Russia. By the way, he was in the United States Army, where he got discharged honorably. He was also part of the John Edwards presidential campaign, and he's an upstate New Yorker. Yeah, they'll never mention that in the news. And he was also celebrated by the LGBT community for turning against NOM, the National Organization for Marriage. Another fact, they'll never mention that Lewis was in the Army. They will never mention that Lewis was on the John Edwards campaign and elected as a delegate. And they will never mention that Lewis was celebrated for turning on NOM by the LGBT community and received awards. Now, he's since then trashed his name and said some more homophobic stuff. But at that time when I was messing with him, those were three facts we never saw mentioned about him in the news. And I always thought that was interesting that they could say all this stuff, but they could not point out that he was born and raised in New York, did all these things. They would never mention he was on the John Edwards campaign. Never. And we go, well, that's almost like lying, isn't it? So the reason he was there was we need to go to the international conference. He had been in Russia before, and he had met his wife in Russia. And at that time when he was over there, America was encouraging people to go. Now, it's not popular to bring that up. Nobody wants to remember that. But there was a time where America and Russia were cool, and America was encouraging people to go to Russia. My first boss went to Russia because the American government encouraged Americans in advertisements to go. So I know this happened. Nobody remembers this period. Nobody brings this up. It's widely documented. There was a movie with Sidney Poitier where he goes to Russia to help their FBI get started because relationships with America and Russia were really good. So this is a definitive period that everybody has collective amnesia about. So they're just like, why would you ever go up? Well, because for 10 to 15 years you said it was cool.
No, you want to act like that didn't happen now, but it happened and it's documented. You can watch the movie with Sidney Poitier. You can see all sorts of statements, etc. A lot of people went, not all of them were spies. That's ridiculous. You just changed your mind about it.
Who's that activist director? He makes movies. What's his name? He went and met Putin and did a documentary about him. It's a main director here in America. I forget his name. Oliver Stone.
Oh.
Oliver Stone did a whole thing. So he's like saying, America has lately been demonizing Putin and Russia to a point where it's like they're trying to get involved in elections and they're trying to get involved in Calexit movement and trying to cause all this division and problems.
That's the storyline.
Right.
That's the storyline.
And that was even back then, but fast forward even again to 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago. So we had... I was accused of being committing numerous felonies, treason, espionage.
Personally, you?
Yeah.
Really?
About 7 to 9 times in 2018.
Okay.
But here's the qualification. You don't have to have evidence. You just go on Twitter and say it, right? So you don't have to have any evidence. You don't have to have seen me do anything. You don't have to have documents. You can have nothing. You can just say, I feel, right?
So just random Twitter people were saying this.
Random. Oh, and people to my face.
Oh, really?
And they would say, "Oh, I got the evidence." And so I mean, the first 3 times you get accused of treason and espionage with life imprisonment, you're kind of scared. By the 4th time, you're like, I started telling people, if you got the evidence, don't share it with the FBI, don't share it with the cops, post it to the internet right now and show the entire world because I know you don't have anything. And hey, then law enforcement would see it, right? And you could damage my reputation all at one swoop by posting it. A lot of FBI investigations are started by posts they see. No one ever posted anything.
Maybe there's no evidence of that.
I'm just saying, I was accused 7 to 9 times. I openly challenged everybody to post, and not one person posted.
That was a time of, I guess some people would call it Trump derangement syndrome. And there was a time where, there was a lot of...
Just saying.
Like that going on.
So we and then we were glad when the Mueller report investigation came out because that cleared us. We were glad when the Senate Intelligence Committee finished their investigation because that cleared us. We were glad when the House Select Intelligence Committee finished their investigation because that also cleared us. And we were glad when they released all their Facebook posts that they said were tied to Russia around 2020 because we weren't anywhere there. So you had the House look into this, the Senate look into this, you had the FBI, Mueller look into this. Nothing. No mention of us, nothing. In fact, they said there was no American citizen who colluded at that time. So, which directly contradicted what everybody was saying about me personally and about us. And
it was just a way to get clicks, way to get, during that time when people were really interested in reading all of this stuff. It had to be about ratings and
I guess, but what bothered me was that the Fair Political Practices of California received a complaint that I had received foreign money from Russia, and I was embezzling that money. And the complaint was written in crayon, not joking, and they said that another witness was with them. So the person writes a complaint in, and they go, I witnessed Marcus do this personally.
In crayon?
Yeah, and I was not alone. Another person witnessed Marcus do this with me. So we found that other person that this complaint named. And we got that other person to write an email to the FPPC saying, this is a lie. I was never there. I never witnessed anything. I don't know who wrote this complaint, and this is a total lie. To which the FPP said, thank you. Now we're definitely going to investigate you. Now that you've proven that the person who filed the complaint has lied and committed fraud and said that they had a co-witness who they don't, and that witness is directly contradicting this thing, we're definitely going to investigate you now. And that's when I realized what's up. So they did the investigation. They subpoenaed the bank accounts. I had to work with them closely. And then, it was horrible.
Who subpoenaed them?
The Fair Political Practices Commission of the California government around 2018. I think the case was 2018/1101. I believe it's one of the first investigations.
Is this something you could look up?
It's public knowledge.
Oh, wow.
We've also published this all over our Twitter and all over our Facebook, and I've made multiple videos this week going, here's all the investigations we did.
I saw one of those.
Here's all so Fair Political Practices Commission of California, case number 2018/1101, looking into California independence. The person who filed the claim lied, faked a corroborating witness. We proved that to the FPPC. They decided to go ahead with the investigation. They subpoenaed our bank accounts. And, it was horrible. But the good thing was we finally got an email from them saying we're closing the case because there's no evidence to back up anything.
So you got a strong defense here.
In 2018. So I thought this was done, right? In 2018.
2018.
4 investigations. The last one subpoenaed our bank accounts. We were accused of laundering foreign money, and they found nothing and dropped it completely. By the way, I emailed 35 reporters who were suggested we were foreign spies, asked them to update their articles with these 4 investigations. Not one even bothered to respond to me. So I just want to point that out. That's the nature of journalism in America today. Now, that was 2018. I thought I was finally done with this when that case was done. Fast forward to now, 3 to 4 years later. You're all Russian spies. You received money from the Russian government. Well, that's not exactly what the indictment says. The indictment says a person connected to the movement may possibly have received money and direction. The indictment does not say the movement did. And the reason the indictment can't say that is because they'd have to contradict 4 other investigations.
Now, okay, so this latest article that just came out last couple weeks ago, okay, do you know the person's name, the Russian that they're talking about?
The person named is Alexander Ionov.
Alexander Ionov. Okay.
Yes.
Have you ever met Alexander Ionov?
He organized the international conferences, so
Okay.
I did know who he was.
And was he an American Russian or just Russian?
I'm not an expert on him. To my understanding is he's just a Russian.
Just a Russian.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's an actual Russian citizen.
And so he came over to America and...
No, he never came to America.
Oh, he did these in Russia.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And invited, California?
Yes, and Texas and Hawaii and multiple other American states and groups.
And when that happens and you didn't go there, was it like a teleconference?
It was the first one was a physical conference.
So did you go to Russia?
I did not.
Oh, you did.
And I've never been to Russia, and I don't
Lewis
speak Russian.
did.
Lewis went to Russia.
So he was representing Yes California,
Yes.
and he went to Russia
Yes.
with Ionov.
He met Ionov there.
He met Ionov there.
Yeah, and he went there.
Now, when Lewis did that, was that illegal in any way?
No.
No.
Because Lewis, and this was another thing where the media lied. So Lewis signed up for a 6-month teaching gig so he could teach English, and that would give him the money to be in Russia so that he could attend the conference. So Texas Nationalists said, go to the conference. If you get into the conference, you can get international media. If you get international media, you can get domestic media, etc., which I just explained that worked out exactly. So the way that we did it was he had been teaching English in Russia, and his wife, he had just married her. The American government did not allow her mom to come visit her on her wedding day. And everybody said we're liars. Of course they would, but they didn't. So Anna was distraught. Lewis had to go back to Russia to introduce Anna to her mom after she got married. Secondly, we wanted Lewis to go to the conference. One way that we could afford to get him there was that he would take a 6-month teaching job, which this is the normal term for teaching English. And since he knew Russian and been there before, it was an easy thing for him to get the job. While he was there, September, October, we're at the conference, everything's great. Everything's wonderful. And then Trump gets elected, which we didn't know. And then it's Russia rigged the election, which nobody had ever heard of a foreign government other than America jumping into another country's election and rigging it electronically. So, those were brand new things. And when that happened, it shocked us. And of course, it looked horrible to have the official head of the movement in Russia while it's coming out that Russia's interfering in this election. But we were pointing out to people, we went before Trump won. We went before it was announced that there was election tampering. Nobody knew there was election tampering before that happened. And frankly, folks, we emailed 400 of you. You all knew we went to Russia, and you said nothing in September, October 2017. 3 months later, it was a big deal for you to say something. But if we go back to the articles that you all wrote in September, October 2017, you aren't that critical.
Right.
Why did you suddenly change your tone?
So Ionov setting up these things in Russia, inviting Yes California and Lewis to attend the conference. That's not an illegal thing in and of itself that America needs to do anything about. It's just a Russian agency doing something over there in Russia.
Yeah, so you can't arrest Americans for traveling abroad.
Right.
And you can't arrest Americans for going to conferences abroad.
Have you ever taken any money from Ionov?
Me, no. And neither has the movement.
And has Lewis?
I can't speak on Lewis.
So it's possible.
So I can't speak on an ongoing investigation. I can't talk about that. So I'm only giving you information that I've already given and said like 50,000 times, so I'm not really giving anything new.
Gotcha.
And I'm giving you information that's already publicly available. So the indictment, if you go read the indictment, does not say the group took the money, doesn't name anybody else. It says a person who other media have identified as Lewis possibly, maybe possibly did this. Now, in the news also, not that I have privileged information, but in the news is reporting that they read an essay by Lewis where he's denying all the charges. So I have to say possible. Now, that's key because the indictment can't say the movement received money and direction because we were already cleared by 4 investigations. And the indictment can't list anybody else because we were cleared by 4 investigations. So now that they can't get anybody of the members and they can't get the org, they got to go after the one last guy who's still in Russia. And
what can they really do to him, though? Because
they're claiming, as I understand, they're claiming that in the indictment, again, not privileged information, this is in the indictment, this is covered by the news, this is nothing, this is already out there, this is me commenting on stuff that's already widely available information, not giving privileged information. This is already out there. The indictment says that Ionov was directly working for the FSB, basically the CIA of Russia. So he was consciously working with them with the stated goal of bringing down America. So Ionov is not just a nonprofit director who likes to have conferences and is independent of the Russian government. The indictment claims that he is secretly an actual Russian agent. So he walks around acting like I run a nonprofit like the Red Cross, and yeah, we have conferences, and yeah, it's beneficial to Russia, but I'm not tied to Russia. The indictment saying, well, actually, you lied, and you are, and you were getting directions from the FSB, and you were getting directions from the FSB with the conscious philosophy of, I'm doing this to bring down the US of A.
And Lewis had no idea about this whole...
Well, hold on.
Well, let's say if that's true.
I got to finish the second sentence.
Sorry, go ahead.
The second half of that is that Ionov informed Lewis of this, or Lewis somehow came to be informed of this, and Lewis continued to work with Ionov. So the claim against what the media has said is Lewis, not me, what the media said is Lewis, is that Lewis knew Ionov was taking orders from the FSB. Lewis knew Ionov was motivated by the concept of destroying America, and Lewis was conscious of all of that and totally okay with it, and then took money and directions. That's what they're claiming, and I think the crime, and they're also not even indicting him. He's an unindicted co-conspirator, so they may not be able to prosecute him for anything. I don't know. I'm just saying the indictment's against Ionov. It's not against him, but the bad thing in that indictment appears to be that people were aware that they were getting directions from the FSB, and they were aware that the reason that they were doing this was consciously to bring down the U.S. Whereas what we had always said was, we just wanted to go to a conference and get attention. We don't care what you were talking about. And no, we never wanted to bring down the US of A. I've been asked many times, and we always said, frankly, we don't think America can be brought down.
Had you known that Ionov was doing that for that reason, if he was, this is all, accusations at this point. I don't know how deep it goes, but let's say he was, obviously you wouldn't have went. Is that what you're saying?
If we had known that Russia was going to interfere in an election, we would not have gone. If we were going to know that people were going to say and believe, although it came out not true, that Russia rigged the election so Trump could be president, we would not have gone. If we had known that this claimed nonprofit that we were referred to by other Americans who had gone and aren't mentioned in the news was actually a front for the FSB with the bent of world destruction of America, no, we wouldn't have gone. So if I had known all those things, hell no.
Okay.
But I want to take you back to October, September 2016. Nobody thought Trump was going to win. Nobody had ever heard of election rigging ever before.
And nobody wouldn't have if like, say Hillary won,
this wouldn't have been
Yeah,
talked about
nobody would have
at
said
all.
anything. No.
The Russian, there would have been nothing about
It was
Russia.
because Trump won and people couldn't figure out how that happened that they immediately jumped on, well, a foreign government made this happen. We now know that that's a total lie. The House Select Intelligence Committee, the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, and the Mueller report and the CIA and Homeland Security all said there's zero evidence of votes being switched. Now, maybe Russia influenced a person, but they did not actually reach into the voting machines and go, did you vote for someone? Oh, you voted for this person instead. Never happened, no evidence. Now, that's what came out 3 years later. Travel back to October 2016 or right after Trump gets elected. People are sure Russia rigged the election, and they mean went into voting machines and switched votes. And that's what everybody thought. And it's not till years later you learn, well, that's not true. And so people freaked out about that.
I remember them talking about that. I didn't believe it, like, on the face of it, but it was something you think about. It's like you wonder about. Let's say it's true that Ivanov lied to you guys, lied to everybody. I mean, that could be possible, but that wouldn't mean anything.
I mean, we never. The other thing to know is that our goal. So we were sovereign California first, and we were in Sacramento, and we had the CHP constantly coming up to our tent, and they're going, "Wow, you guys have so much money and power. Well, I thought you were just like a little fringe movement." And we're like, "No, we're on. We got 10,000 members. We've been in LA Times after we got the money on it." Then another cop would come. Then another cop would come. Then half an hour another cop would come, and then an hour later another cop would come, and they'd always go, "Wow, look at you guys." They thought we were the Sovereign Citizens Movement.
Oh, because of the name.
The Sovereign, yes, we were called Sovereign California, and the day before we were in Sacramento capital, the FBI had listed the Sovereign Citizens Movement as like a domestic terror group. And so the CHP was coming up thinking we were with them, and we were, at the end of the day, we finally figured that out. We rebranded that day.
Okay.
So the moment it looked like we were looking like bad guys to law enforcement, about 2 hours later, we had made the decision that we were going to rebrand, and we had spent thousands of dollars on all that gear. We just wrote off the loss and changed our mind because we didn't want to be seen as criminals, because we were talking about secession, and everybody immediately goes, "You mean get your guns?" So we had to be Johnny Q legal, dot your I, cross your T, super legal, everything on the up and up. Perfect relations with the CHP every time we went, because we didn't want to be accused of anything illegal. That's before Trump gets elected. That's our attitude, is we are on the up and up with law enforcement. We have great relations with CHP. We don't want any problems. We're working hard to steer clear of all this. So then to walk into, you've committed one of the biggest crimes ever in the 20th century, we're like, whoa, that's the total opposite of all the hard work we've done up until this point.
Right. Very interesting. So that's the update. Calexit still not knowingly involved in any kind of Russian idea to bring down democracy in America.
And no one's actually saying that. There are some misleading newspaper headlines, but the indictment doesn't say that.
So the indictment itself, the official indictment doesn't say
Correct.
anything about that. They are trying to go after that guy for. So another part that kind of personally piqued my interest is one of the things that they were saying is that he paid for some posters. Now, a lot of people know I'm a graphic designer. I was working on some of the graphics that Lewis and Marcus were. That was their ideas on banners that I helped design. Right. I don't know if that has anything to do with me at all.
I saw that claim, and it's because they're saying that technically he was getting direction from, or they're claiming, although Lewis denies that he was getting direction from and money from Ivanov. The thing is that the posters that were at the Valentine's Day protest were standard fare. So national divorce, a heart with a split heart, because of Valentine's Day protest with a split heart, America one side, California on one side. We'd been doing that for a year.
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
We'd been saying divorce, irreconcilable differences, broken heart for over a year to 2 years. And so the idea that someone designed our posters for that protest when they look exactly like the stuff we'd been using for the 2 years prior, It doesn't make sense. They would have had to have gone even further back and incepted us, right? So I invented your posters for you, and they look exactly like the things you've always used this entire time. You didn't invent anything for us. That's our normal stuff. Also, I never saw anything.
I did remember one poster I did that Lewis was, he told me to put something about Russia, we're your friends here in California, and big sign. Do you remember that?
That was a protest that never actually happened.
Oh, okay.
We were, we were stopped short. So we weren't able to use that.
I remember.
Get that
I do kind of remember that too. Like you guys got stopped. You guys started to kind of put it up, but
we got stopped, and that came out on RT.
Okay.
So we covered that on RT. We weren't able to do anything.
Russia Today.
That was Russia Today. That was when you could actually see them. And this was in the middle ground when it wasn't clear what was going on. It was like people were accused of stuff.
Now,
it's also
what if during that time, I would get, you guys would pay me. I mean, I was basically donating my time because, you didn't pay me very much. It was a small organization, grassroots. So it's not like you guys.
You mean we didn't have millions of dollars?
No. It was very low amount. But
and where did that money come from? Did it come from me?
I believe it came from you most of the time.
Well, that'd be weird because on my taxes for the last 7 years, I lose $10,000 a year funding this movement. And yet I'm accused of getting millions of dollars from outside the country. Isn't that weird? That the IRS would know this guy wastes $10,000 a year, and yet I'm routinely accused of something, but the IRS could look at it and go, well, that's not true, because otherwise how's he poor and how's he losing all this money?
Do you ever feel like all of these problems, all of these things, kind of pointing the finger and all of this stuff going on, does it ever give you pause and make you think, you know what? I love this idea of Calexit, but it's too much, and I'm going to pursue other ventures at this point. What keeps you going?
I've never had that thought because of the way that I was raised. First, I do want to point out, the other thing they said about us was that the Valentine's Day protest was violent, encouraged to be violent, and encouraged to break into the governor's office. And we actually showed video. And when we showed video, Sacramento Bee saw that and changed the newspaper headline because they're like, this is like 12 people and they are not violent.
12 people. Okay.
They never bothered to go into the governor's office. There was no record of them going into the governor's office, and the whole thing was peaceful. But some newspapers chose to not print that, and others did. Now, why would certain newspapers leave a headline up of Ionov encouraged a violent Valentine's Day protest and not add the line, which never happened, and it was completely peaceful and nobody broke into anything, and they have a history with the CHP going back 3 years of not doing anything like that. Somehow that never got into the media. Now, to answer your question, I have not thought about quitting except under one condition. There is one condition where I will quit, and that's when we get an actual fair debate. So when there's an actual fair debate, and we get to have our counterpoints up there, and the public, at least in some reputable venue, has seen it and go, we heard your arguments, and we understand them, but we think you're wrong. On that day, I would quit. But what happens is we don't even get that opportunity. So San Francisco Examiner wrote an article about why Calexit's a horrible idea. And they had a professor list 10 reasons. We responded going, every one of these reasons is garbage, and here's the citations on why what this professor's saying is not right. Never got printed, never got a response. So that's what I mean. We don't get to have a fair debate. What they'll do is criticize our idea, put out misinformation, and never allow the facts to come out. So when I get a fair debate and the public understands the material and says, we still don't agree, I will accept defeat readily. I've never gotten interviewed by the critics. I've never gotten to put my piece in when somebody criticized us. I've never been interviewed on big TV explaining the points. Rachel Maddow has my face up underneath a thing of how we take Russian money, but I don't get a phone call or even a chance to respond. Right? Sacramento Bee has a picture up of my face with a headline that looks like I'm an Iranian terrorist, but I don't get a phone call or a chance to respond. That's the game. That's the game. I'm a white supremacist. I don't know if you knew that. I was accused of being a white
I
supremacist.
thought you're half Hispanic.
Doesn't matter. I'm a closet white supremacist.
Okay.
I also love Iranian terrorism, according to the news.
Wow.
I also receive millions of dollars directly from Vladimir Putin. I also have a phone line directly to Putin that he'll pick up, according to the news.
You had millions of dollars and you were paying me peanuts to do these posters?
That's what the news says. So it's got to be true, right? No. What is it? I also work for George Soros. I also work for Jerry Brown. And I'm also my favorite was that I'm part of Reconquista, which is the plan to have the Southwest return to Mexico, which I found kind of racist.
That's kind of weird. Yeah.
And I thought, because I'm Latin, so they're like, oh, well, you must believe in Reconquista. And I go, no. And the reason is I understand economics. That's a stupid idea. But you're half beaner, right? So you must want to be part of Mexico again, right? No. And, I think it's a little bit racist to... I remember when so I've been accused of all sorts of stuff that's not true. If we get a fair debate, I would. My father was an officer in the military, and he was supposed to go to Vietnam, and my mom was a staunch Mexican Catholic.
All right. So you were recently on a YouTube stream, and it looks like you joined a...
What did you find?
I'll show you right now. But you did...
Oh, yes.
Okay, so what was this? This was in Texas or something?
Very proud of that. So, yes, California is the most well-known liberal secession group in America. Most of the secession groups are conservative. And we are the de facto well-known liberal ones. So, and we're also not a screaming, yell in your face liberal. So a lot of conservatives like to work with us. So what you're looking at is the first conference of multiple states' secession movements coming together to talk about the right to legally and peacefully secede. And why I think that's important is you have not had a conference of multiple secession movements from multiple states coming together since 1861. So that's the first time that's happened in about 150 years.
Wow.
So it is historic. That's New Hampshire, that's Texas, that's California. All of them are the recognized secession leaders, and it's not some dude who said, I'm leader. Those are all recognized movements. Everybody in those states who likes those like that. And we had a conference, we came together, and we said that national divorce is a good idea, and it is the opposite of civil war, and that's why we should pursue it, because it is the peaceful option. And the other option is liberals try to force their will on conservatives, and conservatives try to force their will on liberals, and we just wait till the day where people start shooting each other in the face.
Yeah. And I did watch this, and I was pleasantly surprised that how cordial it was, how thoughtful it was. It's not like these are dumb people coming up with ideas or angry people. These are just people saying, hey, this might work better. Look, we could be friends across, and these are conservative people talking to liberal Californian people.
Thank you.
To you and saying, we could actually be friends. You guys have your place over there. We'll have our place over here, and everything will be fine. I don't know why people are saying that this would be a civil war. We would be okay with each other. We'd be actually more okay with each other if we did it this way, which was kind of interesting.
Glad you said that. They have the same problems we do. You must be crazy, right? No. You must be insane, right? No, I'm actually quite sane and quite well-read, and I'm quite reasonable and quite logical, and that's why I came to this. The people in New Hampshire, the people in Texas, the people in California all suffer from the same issue, is that this is seen as a radical topic, and so we must be, Jim Bob with a pitchfork and an AK-47. When you talk to Daniel Miller of the Texas Nationalist Movement, he and I both read a book called Nonviolent Warfare by a professor called Gene Sharp. Gene Sharp is the world-recognized expert on the planet for nonviolent revolutions and people's being able to protest their government to get the government that they want. He worked in many of the Eastern European countries that went democratic. He worked in South Africa. He is the world expert. And Daniel and I both know that book inside and out. And we talked about it. And the reason that we did was we knew that we would be claimed to be the total opposite. We would be claimed to be, you're not a guy who would read a book by a award-winning author who's traveled the world and has helped peaceful movements gain independence. That sounds like you're smart and intelligent and know international law, and you appreciate the law. You're nutbag crazy. So, how do you know that? And that's a lot of the truth there. So we all have to prove that we're reasonable people. And that's why we had that conference, to show that. In fact, we've been saying we're trying to normalize the conversation. If we can make it where talking about secession doesn't mean you're crazy or insane. There are some sane, logical, well-informed people who have this opinion. And like you said, they just want to look at this because maybe it's a better option. If we can get the American people to at least view it that way, that's not a yes. That's not people saying we're going to secede tomorrow. But we've gone to where it's crazy to, you're not automatically insane for discussing this. I'd have to actually talk to you. You might actually be a reasonable, informed person. And we've realized that that's common goal for all of us will help all of our movements. And we've also recognized that we have to be, and this is the thing, this is why I really don't like the accusations against us. Yes, California is at the forefront of telling other people how to pursue legal and peaceful secession. Like, we advocate for that. We inform other people how to do it. We've talked to people in other countries on multiple times and said, not sure what's going on over there, but we will only mess with you if you do it this way, and we're going to walk you through how to do it this way so that you know how to do it legally and peacefully. We've done that on 2 different continents.
What do you do, or what do you say when, there's going to be people that call Calexit or California secession or Texas secession inherently anti-American? What do you think about that?
Well, 2 things. One is, how can it be anti-American when it's what the Founding Fathers did themselves? So if you look at the American Revolution, nobody on earth who's a political science scholar outside of America calls it the American Revolution. They call it the American Civil War. Because about 1/3 of the Americans were for the British Crown. Now, in America, we love to tell the story of everybody got together and pushed out the English. That's not what happened. 2/3 were for independence. 1/3 were for the British Crown. And certain American states had more English supporters than American supporters. I don't think you can say secession is un-American. The first Americans did it. Everybody on planet Earth who's a political science scholar recognizes that as a fact. Now, maybe Americans don't, but that's ignorance. So if you look at it and you actually understand what you're looking at, that's secession, folks. So let's move to the military. Here's the thing with the military. My grandfather was in World War II, and I have a family member in all 4 branches. All 5. Coast Guard, Navy, Marines, Army, Air Force. So I'm pretty well represented. Everybody who joins the military has to take an oath. You don't get to just join and, oh, yeah, it's cool, I guess I'm in. Every single person, every officer, every enlisted person has to take an oath to join. And they swear an oath to, do you know what they swear an oath to? The Constitution. No one swears an oath to the territorial integrity of America. It's not in the oath at all.
Right.
Nor do they swear an oath to America as I've known it or 50 stars on the flag. It's not in the oath at all. That oath says one thing: allegiance to the Constitution. Well, if we're pursuing secession through the Supreme Court case of Texas versus White, and we're pursuing secession through going through Congress and getting a vote, and we're pursuing secession through having a registered vote in California, a recognized government of America, then at what point are we not following the Constitution? And if we are following the Constitution, then how are we violating what those soldiers and officers fought for if that's what they officially swore that they were fighting for? Soldiers and officers may come out after the military and go, well, I fought for all 50 states to be together. No, you didn't. That's a lie. We have documentation for every single person who ever served in the United States military for over the last century on why you served, because you had to sign that oath and repeat the pledge. So we know what you did. It's to the Constitution. We're following the Constitution. Now, unless you want to say, I swore an oath to the Constitution, but I don't believe you have the American right of free speech, and I don't believe you have the American right of assembly, and I don't believe you have the American right of debating ideas, and I don't believe you have the American right to redress your government, then maybe they would have a criticism. But any soldier or officer, sailor, Marine, or Coast Guardman who says that is now saying that they are in violation of the Constitution.
Right, right.
So there's no room for criticism of us because we're following things by the law. And every single person since World War II has said that they swore an oath to the Constitution and the constitutional process, which is what we do.
Great answer.
No one ever brings that up, by the way. They'll bring up the disrespectful to the troops, but they'll never bring up, I think it's called the Uniform Code of, it's the Uniform Oath of Enlisted Officers or something like that. It's been around for over 100 years.
Now, we used to talk, earlier we talked about, clipping out stuff. I clipped out a portion of this.
Okay, what do we got?
Okay, I want to know what the context was. Why did you say it? What did you mean? Here, let's see.
The new Batman character isn't as good as the previous Batman character. Is that what the conversation was?
I don't know if it was that controversial.
Okay.
But
all right, what was it? What was it on?
California conservatives.
Here.
Get rid of California conservatives, or Californians will be coming to take over your laws and force them on you. I promise you.
Now, was that a threat?
It was a threat, but it was a threat not from me.
Okay.
So it was like saying, if you keep eating candy, you're going to get diabetes, in a very angry, mean tone. I did the angry, mean tone, but am I really threatening you, or am I explaining, if you eat a bunch of candy, you're going to get diabetes, right? Like, is that me going, if you eat candy, I'm going to give you diabetes, or is it me saying, bro, you know what happens when you eat candy, right? So what I was saying was, in California, it's called California Imperialism. So F.H. Buckley wrote a book on secession. He was a former speechwriter for Donald Trump. He said the most likely secession movement to succeed was California. And he also said Californians practice California imperialism. And what he means is this. Your federal laws that I don't agree with, I don't follow. And I kick off and I refuse. But I think my California laws, you should have to do, even if you don't think it's a good idea. So Bill Maher famously went on his TV show and said, red states, blue states are going to drag you kicking and screaming into the 21st century. It's this idea of, I'm a liberal, I'm going to win elections, I'll take over the federal government, and then I'll use the federal government as a way to force my laws onto you when I know your people don't like it. And the reason I think it's okay for me to force my laws on you, knowing your people hate it, is because I think you're stupid and wrong, and this is for your own good. And one day you'll realize that you were wrong and come around and thank me. Much the way a petulant child as a teenager wakes up years later and goes, oh, Mom, Dad, I was a dumb kid, and you guys were right for punishing me. The problem is that you have adults saying that to other adults. So you have liberals saying this to adult conservatives who are in their 50s and 60s. They're not going to grow up and get more mature and change their mind. So I was telling conservatives, you will either vote California out and let people know that we can be voted out, or California is going to take over the federal government again and again and again and again and continue to force its laws on you because Californians think you're stupid and backwards and we know better and we need to push our laws on you. And you've had literally elected officials and famous Californians say that left and right. So when Professor Buckley talks about California imperialism, this isn't some idle chatter. We have people saying this all the time. It's absolutely our attitude. Your laws suck, but our laws are enlightened, and we're going to force our laws on you, but did you want to take away abortion? We defy the court. We defy the court. That's what the lieutenant governor said. That's what people are saying. That's called nullification. Well, you didn't want to allow transgender students in your athletic program? We're cutting off funds to you, and we're going to see what federal laws and insults we can get on launched. So it's my way, only my way, none of your stuff, only my way, and my way on you too. California has done this for decades. Most Californians love this, don't see any problem with it. They routinely espouse this. It's well documented. And so I told them, conservatives, you don't have the ability to sit idly back and go, California secedes, California doesn't. It is in your best interest, if you want to have the life that you love, to vote us out now. Or we're going to be taking over your hometown. And suddenly your laws are going to be all like ours, and you're going to be saying everything we want you to say. And when I point that out to them, that terrifies them.
Right.
So it's a call to action. I am not lying, though. I'm not lying. I'm not embellishing.
So you think that if they don't do something about it, I mean, I hear Trump saying this too, it's a similar thing. It's like the liberals will take over you if you don't do something about it. That's kind of what he was
Yes.
saying on January 6th. That's kind of what he was saying. You don't do something, then liberals are going to take over. And I do, I think that, like, when it comes down to abortion, people have strong opinions on both sides. I could understand somebody believing that it's a human life and it's murder to do an abortion. I don't agree with it, but you can't make somebody not believe that, especially if religion and Christianity is deep-seated in their culture. So what I'm trying to say is that, like, people should start to be a little bit more understanding about each other. And as far as, that goes, not all states was it gotten rid of. I don't want to give my opinion on Roe v. Wade or anything like that, but I will say that, I'm a fan of more rights, not less. And so, I'm never going to have to get an abortion. I'm not a woman, so I don't want to say too much about it, but I understand the other side, and I understand people believing that and not wanting it. I just think that there should be some better understanding of people on both sides, and maybe there's a way, like you said, to have certain states be one way and certain states be the other way, and still be able to get along. Maybe people do need a lot of people moved out of California, due to taxes or even just the liberal way that California's ran. They left. Maybe if you're in one of these states that are far right and you're a liberal person or somebody who thinks that you're gonna need an abortion or something, that maybe it's okay to think about coming to California or another state where it's legal.
Well,
living there.
I love the Roe v. Wade decision being made. I don't like the decision was made, but I love that a decision was. How do I say this? I'm for a woman's right to choose. I'm from California.
Me too.
California's all about that. Great. However, people had been saying what you were saying. You don't need to secede. Federalism can work. All we got to do is give federalism a try. Federalism will work. That allows different states to be different, which is what the Supreme Court did. Whether you agree with their decision or not, that's what they did, is they returned the decision back to the states. And everybody lost their goddamn mind. And Mike Pence said, let's pass a national abortion ban, not limiting it to the states, and other Republicans backed him. And then California said, well, we're just going to ignore whatever laws you have in your state. So if that decision was made by the Supreme Court to return the right of an abortion to the states, and the Republicans said, we respect that, there will be no talk about a national abortion ban because we have talked about federalism and we respect that. That would be one thing. But they didn't do that. They talked about how they love federalism for decades, and then when it actually happened, they were immediately talking about a nationwide ban, which is not federalism. Mike Pence should have been thrown out of the party for even suggesting that. He wasn't. He was celebrated. So that's Republicans going against federalism when they actually have the opportunity, despite how much they've talked about it. Secondly, when it comes down to the states, you cannot have federalism with different state laws, and one state says, I don't care what your state laws are, I don't recognize any part of it, I don't recognize any of your people, and I don't recognize anything the federal government says. That's also shooting down federalism, and that's what California did. So I see people in the left and on the right destroying the concept of federalism when we actually had the time to have it returned. This was the time to really show that secession isn't the right option and a return to federalism can. And both the conservatives and the liberals lost their minds and immediately violated the concept within 24 hours. I love that because it proves that the concept of federalism will never work, cannot come back, and that people were talking, they were lying. And then when it really came down to it, they couldn't live by those principles. That means secession or civil war is the only option.
You don't think we could fix? I mean, you don't think federalism can work?
Well, why did it not now? So Roe v. Wade was federalism. Why aren't conservatives and liberals going, that's cool, federalism? Why did conservatives say nationwide ban? Why did liberals say we refuse to follow any directions and anything from any other states? All of that is a violation of federalism.
All of that is showing that it's not working.
I'm just saying, you talk a big game,
Right.
then game day's here, time to play football. And you can't throw the football, and you fall every 5 seconds, and you can't even put your jersey on right. Yeah, but bro, I talked about how I could be an awesome footballer for 30 years. But bro, the one day it's time to play, you can't even put your jersey on the right way. And then you say, why does the football have to be made out of pigskin? Does that really sound like somebody who's going to be able to play a day of football? Or somebody who talked a big game and can't walk the walk when it's actually time? And I want to be clear, I'm criticizing both sides. I think federalism has been shown to be a complete failure by both sides because of Roe v. Wade. I'll go you even one further. I saw liberal magazines going, well, don't worry. We got to get America together to realize that Roe v. Wade needs to be reinstated, and we can get America together. All liberals have to do is start reaching out to conservatives who agree with them that women have the right to choose. And then they could form a giant coalition. And I said, that's a great idea. So I went out and I started talking to liberals. And I go, hey, liberals, I found some conservatives who believe a woman's right to choose. Are you ready to work with them? Yeah, great. By the way, they believe America's a Christian white nation. Everybody should be Christians. Women should be in the home. They shouldn't be as vocal. They're not really down with transgender people, and they believe in automatic magazines. But they're for a woman's right to choose. You guys ready to make a coalition and work with all these guys, right? Hell no. Well, that's called federalism. Federalism is forming coalitions. And so we see liberals who will not do the work to form a coalition, and which is what it's going to require to actually get the law to change with Roe v. Wade, and they won't have anything to do with it.
Wow.
So how's federalism going to work? I mean, I'm giving you all these examples of people literally failing in real time to make this happen.
It's not working.
It's here on the... So what other option do we have?
You see it in Congress trying to pass laws and stuff. They can't get it together. I have the California divorce up there.
Yeah. So that's the one they're saying, somebody made for us and financed. And I'm like, we've been doing that for years. What are you guys talking about? This is what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
Nobody called to ask for clarification from the news.
Wow.
Just saying. They just went with it, right? So I guess that's called fair journalism.
So there's your Calexit update from the man himself, the one who started it all. And there's going to be more coming out. We just need to pay attention. I'll keep updating. And if Marcus, please come on in the future to keep us updated on what's going on with that. It's an interesting story, if nothing else. But these type of ideas are what I want to talk about on this podcast. We're going to do a lot of different ideas. The ideas are free to be scrutinized, applauded, however you feel about the idea. And I encourage everyone to to get in the dialogue, make comments, send me an email if you want to, and I'll address it. And I'll, if you have any questions for Marcus as well, we could bring them up in a future podcast. So anything else about Calexit, about a current?
Check us out at calexit.info.info.info. That's calexit.info, or calexit.podia.com. That's calexit.podia.com. Podia is an online course software. We are offering online certification in all of the international and domestic laws related to California independence.
How much does that cost?
It's free right now, but it's going to go up. It's free right now, but it's going to go up to $50 starting next month.
Okay.
I would recommend you get in. It is the only online course about all the rules and regulations regarding secession, and it's online. It's offered. We're the first ones to ever do that ever anywhere on earth. We're very proud of that. You can also find out other voices talking about Calexit, including major California newspapers, San Francisco Chronicle, Joe Matthews, Tom Elias. You can also have some questions answered. We have a question and answer session, and we have a couple of videos up to walk you through. If you go to the site, you can watch videos, Have your questions answered. Download books for free. Take a course for free. It's all free. We have a ton of material available. There is no way that you can walk through just the first page of that site and read there without coming away becoming an expert in everything I just talked about today.
Wow, interesting. So that's Marcus. He's going to tell you about all the ways where it's not only peaceful but legal and good for humanity to actually do this. So
yes,
interesting stuff. Please look him up. Look it up. Look up the past things. I'm gonna try and finish the documentary that we started a few years back, and I'll get that done finally. Sorry to anybody waiting on that. It's just life happens, and it didn't actually work out. But
it's still relevant. It's still good.
Still relevant.
Yeah.
I still have a lot of stuff. I'm hoping to one day get an interview with Lewis about this. Maybe he could say his side of the story. But just to change the subject a bit, what did you think about, Trump's Mar-a-Lago being raided? Like what? What's your? Do you have?
We again. So we're in a weird position, right? So bad things happen, and we celebrate it, not because it's bad, but because it helps our movement. So you don't like seeing people get hurt. You don't like seeing turmoil. You don't like people being sad. But certain things happen, and you go, that's only going to help Calexit. So if you type in national divorce on Twitter, guess what's trending on Twitter since they raided Trump's house? National divorce.
Really?
It's all over.
But not from Californians.
No, mostly from conservatives, some Californians.
So they're saying that because of what's going on with that.
They're saying,
wow.
and it's so bad. Bloomberg had to write an article. There's a couple conservative newspapers coming out and having to say, don't talk about national divorce just because Trump got his house invaded. So his house gets invaded. Talking about secession goes through the roof that day and today, and probably is for the rest of this week. So it was a good week for Calexit because a lot of people are talking about secession and breaking up the country because they did that.
Interesting.
Yeah, conservatives view it as unfair, given that Hillary Clinton was not, really punished for anything.
Right.
The FBI
bring that up a lot.
Well, the FBI literally said your use of the servers was reckless. They literally said that.
Did you see what Andrew Yang said? He was saying that this is
bad optics.
This is bad optics. It could be. Is this political? Is this, and if you come out with nothing against Trump, that's just going to bolster him in 2024.
Yeah.
To run for president.
Clinton was also found with the Steele dossier. Was fake. They used Democratic Party money, and then they fed that and lied to the FBI in order to get that. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. That's also come out in federal court. So when you have these two things come out in federal court, or they're documented and they're fact, and nothing happens to her, but then you go after Trump, they view that as selective application of the law, which they call a banana republic or failed democracy. If that's actually what's happening, that is a sign of a failed democracy. If you have the government, if you have a political party using the arms of the government to attack another political rival and shield themselves from the same justice, that is what happens in failed democracies. So from their opinion, if that what they're saying is correct, this is an example. Now, the liberals view it as Hillary Clinton didn't really do anything wrong, so she didn't need to get punished anyways. Trump did something wrong, so this is just a system working. And which I think is even worse, because it would be one thing for the two sides to hate each other but know what the other side's motive was, but they're actually confusing motives. So the liberals don't even correctly understand what's getting the conservatives upset.
Right.
That only exacerbates the probability of a lack of communication.
Right. Yeah, that's what it is. Our lights are finally giving way. This has been an awesome conversation. I learned a lot. I love the updates on Calexit, what's going on there. Like I said, if nothing else, it's interesting.
More relevant every year.
The Alex Jones trial. I've been watching it. I used to be kind of an Alex Jones fan. He kind of went off the deep end, but he had some true stuff back in the day. But they are taking him. They are just trying to take him down completely. I mean, they just had a trial where he's now ordered to pay $90 million, some crazy number, and punitive damages. And I wonder if this is going to have an effect on the rest of just journalism or free speech in and of itself.
I mean, with him, he shouldn't have said that stuff about Sandy Hook. He was warned at the time, and he just belligerently doubled down.
He kept doubling down.
I remember they were like, "Bro, what are you doing?" He's just like, "I'm going to double down." Well, okay, so he consciously went this way.
Yeah.
There were warning signs, and he was like, "Nope, I'm digging in." Okay, well, that's your conscious decision after being informed to go that way.
That's true. He had plenty of warnings.
There were plenty of warnings.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, there were plenty of warnings for him to at least a reasonable person to conclude, I need to stop and look into if I'm definitely not doing anything wrong before I continue. And his attitude was full steam ahead. So that's dumb. And nobody doing media should do that. Secondly, he kind of doubled down. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who double down on idiots. Everybody makes mistakes, but when you are confronted and then you double down, you get whatever's coming. Sorry. I don't think it will chill news because he wasn't really a good news source. I mean, the guy lied about a third of the time. I remember watching him, and you could never know what he was saying was true or not. I remember every episode of his I had to watch. I had to go double check every single thing he said, and a third of it was a straight up lie. The other 2/3 was informative, but I remember I never watched the show of his without looking up every last thing he said for that one show, each show on the internet, and going, damn, about a third of the time, every single episode, this guy just makes it up. And you don't know what's what.
Yeah.
He was widely known for that. I do think there will be a chill effect on journalism, not because of him, but because of Julian Assange. Julian Assange did whistleblow. He did highlight something. It was a legitimate news story. It has been corroborated as fact. Obama was not going to imprison him because the Obama administration was afraid of how it would look on free speech, and the Joe Biden administration decided to imprison him, not caring how it looked on free speech. I find that particularly troubling because Obama said, don't do that. It's going to make people think we're a third world country. And then Biden says, oh, I'm doing it.
I didn't realize that. I never looked Assange up lately. So he was, since Biden became president, he actually...
Biden's pursuing prosecution on Assange in a way that was recommended against by the Obama administration because of how it would look. And their opinion is go for it. Now, here's the thing. You can't say whistleblowers are okay and then imprison a whistleblower. So that is going to have a major chill effect, and especially the moment he's in prison, because it will show that the federal government can prosecute whistleblowers. That's never happened before.
So maybe Obama was right about that, yeah.
That will be, so like you saw the president shoot someone dead and you want to go to the New York Times. Now you could be prosecuted and they could too.
Right.
If you go through with the Assange thing. So that will set a new legal precedent going forward in America that we've never had for the last 150, 200 years. That's going to ruin journalism as you know it.
Awesome.
Alex Jones is nothing compared to what's going on with Assange. That's the real story.
Yeah.
And I would point out to you, how much do you hear about Assange compared to Jones? I mean,
I just said, like, I didn't hear anything about it.
Exactly.
And
because
I'm hearing about Alex Jones.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing about...
Yeah, because he's a buffoon and Assange is the real story. And that's why
Yeah.
they're not going to cover it.
Interesting.
This is America. This is why we want out. Because we are informed.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
tough.
I'll quit when I get a fair debate.
Yeah.
When I get to have something, people are like, we're aware of the facts that you know, but we don't agree. That'd be one thing.
Well,
but
not
then-
only a fair debate, you also have to lose the debate, because if you win, you know what I'm saying? If you win the debate.
Well, I'm going to win the debate, so that might be the last thing I do, but that's fine. We need to have a fair debate. They won't let us. They'll do the thing like Jones and Assange. Look at Jones. Look at Jones. Look at Jones.
Right.
Don't look at Assange. And yet we're aware. And when you do the thing that you're going to do with Assange, that's not America as you and I have known it before. That's a less free, more totalitarian, more like Russia, more like China type country. That's a bad thing. And that's something we would not do in California because we really respect journalism here. They would never try them here if we were independent because of the chill effect. But it'll happen in America. And once that happens, now that law is part of us here in California. So all the bad stuff that goes on in America eventually comes to us. That's why we want to cut us off from them, because this thing like Assange, it's coming.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna keep looking this stuff up.
Yeah.
And that's what this podcast is gonna be about. Like I said, so thank you so much for coming on, Marcus. It's been a pleasure. This is my first episode. We're gonna do a lot more. So
You were my first two.
keep it buckled in. Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
And I want to say thank you for letting me come on the Mexican Rogan
Mexican Rogan thank you.
podcast.
Yes, yeah, self-proclaimed. Okay.
Self-proclaimed.
All right, thanks a lot.